Will you braid my hair?
Of course, sweetie.
Lena, it's good to see you.
You too, Ethan.
The morning sun stretched softly across the quiet neighborhood. Inside a small, cozy kitchen, Ethan moved with quiet focus, toasting bread, slicing apples, packing a tiny lunchbox with care. His hands were rough, but every motion carried warmth. From the hallway, the small voice of his daughter, Mia, broke the silence. "Dad, can you braid my hair like Mom used to?" Ethan paused. The question landed like a soft ache. He smiled faintly, kneeling to her level. "I'll try, sweetheart. But you might need to fix it later." Mia giggled, nodding with sleepy eyes. As she left for school, Ethan stood by the door a moment longer than usual, watching her little backpack disappear around the corner. Then he turned back to his laptop on the table. A half-finished ad blinked on the screen. Room for rent, quiet home near campus. Moments later, a knock echoed. A young woman stood outside, a college girl, Lena, clutching her backpack, eyes tired but hopeful. Ethan's expression softened. He didn't know yet. This meeting would change everything. The morning sun spread across the kitchen table where Ethan was fixing breakfast. Eggs slightly burnt, toast a little too brown. It was an ordinary start to what would soon become an extraordinary day. Outside, a small car pulled up. Lena stepped out, clutching her backpack, eyes scanning the quiet street like someone searching for peace after a long storm. Ethan opened the door. His sleeves rolled up, hands still dusted with flour. "You must be Lena," he said with a kind smile. She nodded, nervous but hopeful. Inside, the home felt lived in. Books stacked beside the couch, crayons scattered on the floor, a faint smell of coffee and old wood. Ethan's daughter, Mia, peeked from behind the door frame, curious. "Hi," she whispered. Lena knelt, smiling gently. "Hi there. You must be Mia." The little girl giggled and disappeared, her tiny footsteps echoing down the hall. Over the next few days, the rhythm of their home began to change, the sound of an extra chair pulling up at breakfast, laughter mixing with the clatter of dishes, Mia sitting beside Lena as they colored together. Ethan would often pause mid-task, watching, realizing how quickly Lena had become part of their small world. Yet there was something else. Some nights when the house was quiet, Lena would sit by the window, her phone in her hands, face dimly lit by the screen. A message would appear, and her expression would tighten, eyes glistening with worry. Then she'd switch it off, pretending nothing happened. On the TV in the background, a newscaster's voice broke through. "Billionaire Victor Hales announces a new charity fund for struggling college students." Ethan barely noticed, but Lena did. Her hand froze midair. For a brief second, the warmth in her face disappeared, replaced by something colder. Days passed quietly in Ethan's home. Morning routine settled like clockwork. Breakfast, school drop-offs, coffee cups stacked by the sink. Yet beneath that peaceful rhythm, something felt slightly off. Ethan couldn't explain it, but sometimes he'd catch Lena staring out the window too long, her thoughts miles away. At dinner, when Mia would chatter about her day at school, Lena smiled. Yet her eyes carried a sadness she couldn't hide. One evening, Ethan walked past her room and heard faint whispers. Her voice trembled. "I found the files." "He can't keep hiding this," she said, clutching her phone tightly. There was silence on the other end, then a hurried, whispered reply he couldn't make out. Ethan froze in the hallway. His instincts told him to knock, to ask what was wrong, but something stopped him. Maybe it was the fear of hearing an answer he wasn't ready for. Later that night, as the house slept, a faint blue glow flickered from under Lena's door. Ethan passed by quietly, peering through the small gap. She sat at her desk, laptop open, surrounded by printed articles and newspaper cutouts. One headline caught his eye. "Victor Hales, the man who owns everything." The billionaire's photo, a smile too polished to be real, reflected off Lena's eyes. She wasn't just browsing. She was digging, searching, remembering. The next morning, she looked tired. She forced a smile when Mia hugged her, but her voice cracked when she said, "I'm fine." Ethan wanted to believe it. He tried. That night, he found her sitting alone on the porch, wrapped in her coat despite the mild air. "You ever wish you could start over?" she asked softly. Ethan glanced at her, the porch light flickering between them. Every single day, he replied. Lena smiled faintly as if that small truth gave her courage. But when she went inside, Ethan noticed she locked her door behind her. Inside her room, her laptop screen glowed again. A folder opened. A series of documents appeared, coded names, offshore accounts, hidden payments. The truth was right there. And now, Ethan unknowingly lived under the same roof as the girl who could bring down a billionaire. Days rolled by, and despite the quiet tension that lingered between secrets, something soft began to bloom in Ethan's home. Lena's presence brought a warmth he hadn't felt in years. Mia adored her. Every afternoon she'd run into Lena's arms with stories from school, her laughter echoing through the small kitchen. Ethan watched them one evening from the porch. Lena was teaching Mia how to ride her old bike. "Don't look down, sweetheart," Lena called out, steadying the handlebars. "Look where you're going. Trust yourself." Mia giggled nervously, pedaling forward until she wobbled, then found her balance. "I did it," she squealed. Ethan smiled quietly, his heart stirring with an emotion he thought he'd buried long ago. Later that night, the three of them painted together at the kitchen table. Mia's hands were covered in blue paint. Lena's laughter was contagious, and Ethan, for the first time in years, felt his home come alive again. He caught himself watching Lena when she wasn't looking. There was a light in her eyes that reminded him of his late wife. The same kindness, the same quiet strength. When Mia finally went to bed, Ethan stayed behind, helping Lena clean the brushes. "You're good with her," he said softly. "She needs someone like you." Lena smiled, her tone calm but wistful. "I needed someone like her too." They both fell silent, the air thick with unspoken stories. Ethan wanted to ask about her past, about the shadows behind her smile. But he didn't. Instead, he said, "You remind me of someone who fought for what's right, no matter what it cost." Lena's eyes flickered, a flash of pain, then gratitude. "I wish I could be that brave," she whispered. The next morning, as sunlight spilled through the curtains, Ethan found a small drawing taped to the fridge. Mia had drawn all three of them together, hand in hand. Above it, she'd written in her wobbly handwriting, "My family." Ethan stood there for a long moment staring at it. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring. But for now, in that quiet little house, something real, something healing, had begun to grow. It was a quiet Sunday afternoon when everything changed. The air outside was heavy with rain, and the soft drumming on the window filled the silence of the house. Ethan sat in the living room reading while Lena stared at her laptop, her face pale under the screen's glow. For days, Ethan had noticed her growing distant, her smiles forced, her eyes darting toward the window at every sound. Finally, she closed the laptop and took a deep breath. "Ethan," she said quietly, her voice trembling. "There's something I need to tell you." He set his book aside, his brow furrowing. "What's wrong, Lena?" She hesitated, hands shaking. "Before I came here, I worked as an intern for a man named Victor Hales." The name alone carried weight. Ethan had heard it before, the billionaire everyone admired for his charities and speeches. "He's not who people think he is," she continued. "I found proof on files, videos, everything. Money laundering, trafficking, people silenced. I tried to expose it." Ethan felt his pulse quicken. "Lena, are you saying?" She nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. "They found out. He sent people after me. I've been running ever since." For a moment, Ethan couldn't speak. The cozy warmth of his home suddenly felt fragile, like one wrong move could shatter it all. He looked toward Mia's room, the soft hum of her lullaby toy still playing. "You brought danger here," he said softly, not out of anger but out of fear. "I know," she whispered. "And I'm sorry. I didn't mean to drag you into this. I just needed a place to breathe, to feel normal again." Thunder rumbled outside as Ethan walked to the window. Across the street, a black car sat idling. Its engine hummed faintly, headlights cutting through the rain. He felt a chill run down his spine. Lena noticed it too. "They found me," she said, her voice breaking. Ethan turned to her, his expression changing from fear to resolve. "Then they found us," he said firmly. "You're not facing this alone." For a brief second, she looked at him, truly looked, and saw the same quiet courage she thought only existed in stories. In that moment, the single dad and the hunted girl stopped being strangers. They became a family bound not by blood but by shared danger and unspoken trust. The next morning, the sun broke through heavy clouds, but the house didn't feel warm anymore. The air carried a strange stillness, one the kind that comes before something goes wrong. Ethan stood by the kitchen window again, sipping coffee, his eyes fixed on the same dark car parked across the street. It hadn't moved all night. Lena walked in, her face pale from another sleepless night. She tried to smile at Mia, who was humming softly while packing her crayons for school. But her hands shook as she zipped the bag. Ethan noticed every tremor. He whispered, "You don't have to pretend. I see it, and they're watching, aren't they?" Lena's voice was barely a breath. "Yes, I think they're waiting for me to make a mistake." Later that afternoon, as the wind picked up, a knock came at the door. Not loud and polite, almost casual. Ethan opened it halfway. Two men stood there wearing delivery uniforms, holding a brown package with no label. Their smiles didn't reach their eyes. "Package for Lena Moore?" one of them asked. Ethan's heartbeat quickened. "No one by that name lives here," he said firmly, closing the door. But before it latched, he caught a glimpse. One of the men tapping an earpiece, murmuring something quietly. Lena stepped out from the hallway, fear washing over her face. "It's them," she whispered. Ethan moved quickly, locking the door, pulling the curtains shut. "Listen to me," he said, his voice steady but low. "You're not turning yourself in. Not after all this. You did the right thing." Tears slipped down Lena's cheeks. "But I've brought danger to your family. If I go to the authorities," he cut her off. "Family doesn't run from truth." In that quiet moment, as shadows lengthened across the walls, Ethan knew the storm wasn't over. It was just beginning, and this time, he would fight to protect not just his daughter, but the girl who had become part of their home. That night, the wind howled against the windows, and the air outside carried a weight, the kind that whispered of danger coming closer. Ethan couldn't sleep. Every creak of the floorboards, every flicker of a shadow made him sit up. Lena had fallen asleep on the couch, laptop open beside her, code and documents glowing faintly on the screen. He checked on Mia, who was sleeping peacefully with her stuffed rabbit. For a moment, the warmth of her innocence gave him strength, and then he saw the movement outside. Headlights. Slow. Silent. Ethan's body froze. A car rolled to a stop across the street. Not the same one from before, a different one, darker, with its lights dimmed. His instincts, buried since his army years, roared back alive. He moved quietly through the hallway, heart pounding. Downstairs, Lena stirred. "What is it?" she whispered. "Someone's here," he said, his tone like stone. Before they could react, a crash shattered the silence. The back door burst open. Two men stepped inside, faces covered, moving like professionals. "Get Mia!" Ethan barked. Lena ran upstairs without hesitation while Ethan grabbed the old metal rod from the fireplace rack. The intruders didn't expect a fight, they expected fear. But Ethan wasn't just a father. He was a protector forged by loss. He swung as one lunged, hitting hard enough to send the man sprawling. The second aimed something, and not a gun but a taser. Sparks cracked through the air as Ethan ducked, tackling him into the wall. Upstairs, Mia cried out, "Daddy!" The sound tore through him. Lena yelled from the landing, "Keep them busy. I'm uploading the files." Through adrenaline and chaos, her words clicked. She wasn't just fighting for herself. She was finishing what she started. The laptop upstairs blinked alive as encrypted files poured into global news servers. Screens across the world began receiving the truth Victor Hales had buried for years. The first man staggered to his feet. "You don't know who you're dealing with," he hissed. Ethan's voice came low and cold. "I don't care." Then red and blue lights flashed outside, sirens, loud, echoing closer. The intruders froze, realizing the time had run out. They dashed for the back door, but patrol cars already boxed them in. Officers swarmed the yard as Ethan dropped the rod, breath heavy, body trembling from exhaustion and fury. Lena came down the stairs, eyes red, shaking, clutching the laptop. "It's done," she whispered. He looked at her, chest rising and falling. "You did it," she nodded. "We did it." Outside, as dawn began breaking, news anchors across the city repeated the same headline. Billionaire Victor Hales under federal investigation after explosive data leak. Inside that quiet home, Ethan hugged his daughter tight, the storm finally over. Morning light crept slowly through the curtains, painting soft gold across the living room floor. The chaos of the night was gone, replaced by a fragile calm. Outside, yellow police tape fluttered gently in the early breeze, a quiet reminder of everything that had just ended. Ethan stood by the window, a mug of coffee in his hands. His reflection in the glass looked older, wearier, but also peaceful. The fear that had lived in his chest for weeks had finally lifted. Behind him, Mia sat cross-legged on the couch, drawing with colored pencils. She hummed softly, unaware of how close they'd come to losing everything. Lena walked in, her face pale from exhaustion but calm. She wore one of Ethan's old jackets, too big for her, sleeves rolled to her elbows. In her hand was a small envelope. "They're moving me today," she said softly. "Witness protection." Ethan turned, nodding slowly. He already knew it was coming, but hearing it still hit hard. She hesitated, then smiled faintly. "You believed me when no one else did. You didn't just give me a room, you gave me a family." He smiled back, eyes glistening. "And you gave us a reason to fight again." Mia ran up and hugged Lena's waist. "Will you come back?" she asked in a small, trembling voice. Lena crouched down, brushing a strand of hair from the girl's face. "Someday, maybe. But until then, you have to be brave for your dad, okay?" Mia nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. Ethan watched as Lena stepped outside. A car waited at the curb, engine running. She looked back once, the morning sun catching the corner of her eyes, making them shine. He waved, and for a brief second, time felt still, three souls tied together by truth, loss, and courage, as the car drove away. Ethan looked toward the sky, whispering to himself, "Sometimes the people we help end up saving us too." And with that, the story ended, not in sorrow, but in quiet, resolute peace. The world outside had begun to move again, children laughing, cars passing, life returning to its rhythm. But inside that little house, something had changed forever. Ethan watched Mia playing by the window, her laughter echoing through the morning light. For the first time in years, his heart felt steady, not because life had become easier, but because he'd finally remembered what it meant to stand for something true. Lena's absence lingered like a memory, a reminder that courage sometimes wears quiet faces. As Ethan looked up at the sky, a soft voice played in the narration, filled with warmth and reflection. Sometimes the people we help end up saving us too. And sometimes the smallest acts of kindness can rewrite the biggest stories. The camera pulled back, the house small against the rising sun, peace finally finding its home.